Hey guys, just back with another C programming video. This video is on the external modifier. So the external keyword or the external modifier. The external keyword, so it's basically extern, so E-X-T-E-R-N. Extern is a short name for external. It's a little confusing to understand. I recommend just playing around with it. But it's similar to the static keyword in Java. So it allows you to access a variable from another file and kind of keep the variable as one variable rather than defining a bunch of them and setting them equal to each other. So it allows basically one variable to be accessed from different files sharing the same data. You can use it kind of as a global variable as well, or you can use the external keyword to signal that it's going to be a global variable, and you can use it to access other files with the same variable. So when we write the extern keyword, when we write extern some data type, some variable name, no memory is allocated, only property of variable is announced. So multiple declarations of the extern variable is allowed within the file. This is not the case with automatic variables or local variables. The extern variable says to the compiler, go outside from my scope, and you'll find the definition of the variable that I declared. So the compiler believes that whatever the extern variable said is true and produces no error. The linker throws an error when it finds out no such variable exists. When an extern variable is initialized, then memory for the variable is allocated and it will be considered defined. So any other information I can give you guys, basically we'll just do an example here, a coding example. At least this is the first one. This is one taken from the C programming book, by Brian Kerningham and Dennis Ritchie, the creators of the C language. So we'll start with this example. So here we'll just have we'll include the header file. So hopefully you guys, another window popped up, hopefully you guys can see that, but should be still recording. So here we have include stdio.h. And here we'll just define max line. So we'll use the define keyword. I'm not sure if I think we went over this, but if it's basically a constant. So define max line, and then you don't use the equal sign, and you just say however much you want it, the value to be, or whatever string. So define max line 1000. So underneath the include statement, define max line 1000. We'll have int max. So character array char line of array index max line. So a char variable named another char array named longest of size max line. Did I say type up here? I meant size if I said type. So these are going to be global, of course, since they're above the main function and the rest of the function. So then we'll have int get line. Actually, I think these are going to be the prototypes. So below we'll have prototypes here. So in getLine, we'll pass in void as parameters. And here we'll have void copy. And we'll pass in void as parameters as well. So underneath maybe I'll just do some comments here just to show you guys kind of what the variables are, what the variables are used for at least. So here we can say that int max is the max input line size. The char line array is the current input line. And the longest, so longest array is the longest line saved here. That's what it says. So then we'll have our main function here. I thought I did this one with you guys already, maybe I guess not, but that's okay. So we'll do this in this video. We'll do the extern modifier, extern keyword. It's used in C++ as well, and it's also used in MQL4 and MQL5, which are the C++ frameworks for trading bots and stuff. So you're going to see it a lot. So sometimes you may see it and won't really understand what it means, but it's pretty much it allows the sharing of the data between the files. You have to define it in a special way, so we'll just try to, we're not going to use multiple files here, but this is just the first example, so we might do another example later on. So here we'll have, so here this is the main function here. So we'll say that it print longest input line So here we'll have an int len variable. I think that's supposed to be length. Then here we'll call extern here. So extern int max. So here, see, notice how we defined it up here, and now we're calling extern. So the compiler is going to look outside the scope for the definition. Okay, so then we'll use extern again for longest. So we'll say extern char longest array semicolon. And we'll have max point to 0. So we're going to be calling another function here. I like to do that. I don't like to do them this way. I like to do them backwards, like so that you have the function already. But that's okay. So we'll just say this time we'll do it. So we'll just say while. Actually, maybe we can stop and come back. So here we'll have while len points to get line is greater than 0. And we'll say if, actually we'll just continue with it for now. So we'll say if len is greater than max. If you're finding yourself confused with this, I recommend doing the methods, the functions backwards. which you should have done. So we still have to do copy and get line, so I'd recommend doing copy, get line, then the main function. That's the best way. I should have done that now. Actually, I may do that now, to be honest, just because that helps with understanding better. So here I'm going to do that instead, because that's how I learned programming languages. I do them backwards, so that way I know what when I write it, I know what it's asking. So here we'll just have void copy, pass in void as parameters. So it just says copy, that's all it says. For the comment, so here we'll just have an int I variable. We'll say extern again, extern char line array, and then a longest array as well. So we're defining extern twice. So then we'll have I points to 0 here. So we'll have while longest of array index I points to line of array index I. Does not equal to null. Then we'll have plus I. So we'll go over the pre-increment and the post-increment and pre-decrement and post-decrement operators in the next video as well. I'll make sure to do a video on that, just to show the differences between I++ and ++I. So pretty much all you really need to know for that is ++I is going to increment the variable before and pretty much before it executes, and if you do I++, it's going to increment it after it executes. So once you call it again, then you'll see the change. So we'll go over that in more detail later on, because sometimes there can be some confusion regarding that. So it's really just ++I means I plus 1. That's all it really means. I equals or I points to I plus 1. So while longest of array index I points to line of array index I, and then that does not equal to null, then increment I. So that's copy. That should be the end of copy, and then we'll have get line just, I guess in this case we'll do it above. So this just says get line, so we'll just skip the comment. So we just have int get line passes in void as parameters. So here we'll just say there's an int c variable and an I variable. We'll call extern again char line array. So we'll have an extern char line array, and then we'll have a for loop here. So we'll have, this is a bit of an advanced for loop, so that's okay. So we'll have for I points to 0, for I points to 0, I is less than max line minus 1. And C points to get care. So and we're gonna have a parentheses here, so we'll have parentheses here, C points to get care. So we'll call the get care function in the loop, and then we'll say does not equal EOF. And so there's more ands here. And C does not equal a new line. Plus plus I, so increment I by 1, so I equals I plus 1. So the middle condition's kind of advanced, but we'll go over it in the debugger as usual. So it should be correct. So for I points to 0, I is less than max line minus 1. So for I points to 0, I is less than max line minus 1. And C points to get care. Close the parentheses while still in the second set of parentheses. Does not equal EOF, and C does not equal new line. So for that second condition, it's saying for I, so for the first part, is for I is equal to 0, then I is less than max line. So and I is less than max line minus 1. I is less than max, so it's going to check if it's true or false. So I is less than max line minus 1. And C points to get care does not equal EOF. So whatever C points to, it's going to check if it's not equal to EOF and it's not a new line, then increment I by 1. Then here on the next line we'll have line of array index I points to C. So it's going to get what C is currently holding, what value C is currently storing. Then we'll say if C points to a new line, so if C points to a new line, then line of array index I points to C plus plus I here, so increment I by 1 again, add 1 to I. Then below that we'll have line of array index I points to null, and then return I at the bottom. So line of array index I points to null, return I if that's the last case. So now we know what getLine's doing. kind of, excuse me. So now that we know what getLine's doing, and copy, at least you have an idea, then here we'll go back to the main function. So we'll have while line points to getLine is greater than 0, if len is greater than max, then we'll have max points to len. Then call the copy method or function. Then here we'll say if max is greater than 0. It says there was a line as a comment here, so there was a line. Then we'll have printf %s longest. So we're going to print out the longest string, which is a character array. And then we're going to return 0. So here are the external variables in main, getLine, and copy. In main, so the external variables in the main function, getLine function, and the copy function are defined by the first lines of the example. To the first lines of the example, we have so the first, I'm just reading the description of the code, so we are defined by the first lines of the example above, which state their type and cause storage to be allocated for them. So that what are all the external variables that we have? So we have max, longest, line. Okay, so let's just see which ones. So we have, starting from the top to bottom, we have max, which is extern, longest, which is extern. Then we have line, which is extern again, at the bottom in getLine. And then in copy we also have extern, char line, and longest. Extern, char line, and longest. Okay, so it looks like it's accessing them from different functions. Personally, I feel like you don't really need to do this because you could just set them as you could just make it a global variable. All functions would have access to it. So I feel like this example is kind of dumb because if you have only reason you really need it if you have these files in different source files, then you're accessing the same variable. That's what pretty much I think the best use is for the keyword. Otherwise here you don't really need it, and I believe functions have like an invisible extern keyword before them as well. So I'll just continue to read the code description. So it says, syntactically, external definitions are just like definitions of local variables, but since they occur outside the functions, the variables are external. Before a function can use an external variable, the name of the variable must be made known to the function. One way to do this is to write an extern declaration in the function. The declaration is the same as before except for the added keyword extern. So it's basically saying just to call extern, call the extern keyword in the basically the function you want to use. Then it says in certain circumstances the extern declaration can be omitted if the definition of the external variable occurs in the source files before its use in a particular function. That's what I thought, so I don't know why they're defining it so many times. I think you just need to define it once in the file itself. So I feel like I could come up with a greater example in another video. We'll just continue with this one for now. So it says extern declarations in main getLine and copy are thus redundant. The extern declarations in main getLine and copy. That's what I thought, because you only really need to do that once. Because again, it said in certain circumstances, the extern declaration can be omitted if the definition of an external variable occurs in the source file before its use in a particular function. So that just means you really just need to do it once. That's what I thought. Then there is no need for an extern declaration in the function. The extern declarations in main, getLine, and copy are thus redundant. In fact, common practice is to place definitions of all extern variables at the beginning of the source file and then omit all extern declarations. That's the way I've seen it being used. If the program is in several source files and a variable is defined in file 1 and used in file 2 and file 3, the extern declarations are needed in file 2 and file 3 to connect the occurrence of the variable. That's what I think makes sense. That's why you need it. Here it's redundant, so that's what the compiler is also telling me. CLine's telling me that the extern modifier is redundant. I don't know if you guys can see that here, but if I hover over this, it says clang tidy redundant max declaration. It has them for all of them. So you really just need it once. You don't even really need it in the same file, because you could just make it global. So just a continued description. So it says that the usual practice is to collect extern declarations of variables and functions in a separate file, historically called a header, that is included by the hashtag include at the front of each source file. So you can also include them in a header file. And just import it or include it. That's another way to set up to basically gain access to the other variables and other files. So you can set up external through a header file, basically. So a header file has the .h type instead of a .c file type. So the suffix .h is conventional for header names. The function of the standard library, for example, are declared in headers like stdio.h. The topic is okay. So since the specialized versions of getLine and copy have no arguments, logic would suggest that their prototype at the beginning of the file should be getLine and copy. But for compatibility with older C programs, the standard takes an empty list as an old style declaration and turns off all arguments list checking. The word void must be used for an explicitly empty list, so that's why they tag void in there, which is fine. You can tag void if you want. In other languages, excuse me, you don't need to include a void in the function prototypes or just in the function itself. Excuse me. But it's kind of sometimes it helps to know that it's just you're making it explicitly show that it has no parameters with void. So just to clarify, you should note that, so in the description it says you should note that we are using the words definition and declaration carefully when we refer to external variables. Definition refers to the place where the variable is created or assigned storage. Declaration refers to a place where the nature of the variable is stated, but no storage is allocated. So basically declared and initialized, or declared and defined. So same way, defined means initialized, which means you're pointing the declaration to a value. So like int I is a declaration where it's just int I semicolon, but int I points to 0 is a definition or initialization. So it says, by the way, there is a tendency to make everything in sight an extern variable because it appears to simplify communications. I think they're advising not to do that. So it says, but external variables are always there even if you don't want them. Yeah, so they're pretty much just advising not to do that. So I'll just read it just to clear up any confusion. So it says, by the way, there is a tendency to make everything in sight an external variable because it appears to simplify communications. Argument lists are short, and variables are always there when you want them. But external variables are always there even when you don't want them. So that's kind of confusing because I don't believe every variable has an invisible extern modifier, unlike a function. So not sure what they're getting at there, but relying too heavily on external variables is fraught with peril since it leads to programs where data connections are not at all obvious. Variables can be changed in unexpected and even inadvertent ways, and the program is hard to modify. So they're just saying there's another code that they're going to talk about later on where they don't use external. And they're just advising not to use external unless you really need it. So that's pretty much it. Before that, they said external, so before the code they had another description though. They said the variables in main such as line, longest, etc. are private or local to main because they are declared within main and no other function can have direct access to them. So we've covered local variables, which are private variables pretty much already. The name is true of the variables in other functions. For example, the variable I in getLine is unrelated to the I in copy. Each local variable in a function comes into existence only when the function is called and disappears when the function is exited. So this is why such variables are known as automatic variables. Following terminology in other languages, we will use the term automatic henceforth to refer to these local variables. Because automatic variables come and go with function invocation, they do not retain their value from one call to the next. So basically, once the function's done, the garbage, there is no garbage collection in this language, but it's basically gone. There's no more memory for it. It will contain garbage, pretty much. That's what it says here. So it says, because automatic variables come and go with function invocation, they do not retain their values from one call to the next. They must be explicitly set upon each entry. If they are not set, they will contain garbage. As an alternative to automatic variables, it is possible to define variables that are external to all functions. So the way they describe it here is just like a normal global variable, so we kind of cleared that up earlier on where we said that it was redundant, and really external should just be used to use the same variable in different source files. That's the best use of it. So hopefully I clear up any confusion with that. So as an alternative to all automatic variables, it is possible to define variables that are external to all functions. That is, variables that can be accessed by name by any function to the mechanism is rather like Fortran, common, and Pascal variables, so no one uses those anymore in outermost blocks. If you don't know what those are like old programming languages. Because external variables are globally accessible, they can be used instead of argument lists to communicate data between functions. Furthermore, because external variables remain in existence permanently rather than appearing and disappearing as functions are called and exited, they retain their values even after the function that set them have returned. So they retain their values even after the functions that set them have returned. So once the function's done, that value is still being stored in memory throughout. It's being shared to wherever you want to access it. So it's pretty much like a static variable in Java. I don't think we use a static keyword. We might do a static keyword in C. It's completely opposite. It pretty much just makes it private to that one file. So it has a exact opposite definition between C and Java for static anyways. So we may do that after. So an external variable must be defined exactly once outside of any function. That sets aside storage for it. The variable must also be declared in each function that wants to access it. So that's a lie, because I don't believe that's true, because they mentioned that it just has to be written once in the source file to be accessed. Usually globally, right? So an external variable must be defined exactly once outside of any function that sets aside storage for it. The variable must also be declared in each function that wants to access it. This states the type of the variable. The declaration must be an explicit extern statement or may be implicit from context. To make the discussion concrete, let us write this example code. That's pretty much it. So that's the whole thing on it. That's all the information this book that created this language has on the external variables, so hopefully that clears up anything. We might do a second example, so this was the first one. We may do another example just to play around with it, just to see. The best way to learn something is to just test what it can do and can't do. So just see what it can do, just play around with it. See what you can access, see what you can't. That's the best way to learn coding. So we'll try to make some files after and then just see what we can access, how many times we need to define it and all that. So now let's just walk through the debugger. That's the best thing to do. So let's set a breakpoint here. We'll set one here. We might not get that one, so declarations usually probably won't be seen in the, won't be set to a breakpoint at least. It'll just be automatically executed, so it won't start till there. We'll set some here too, just in case. Excuse me, and we'll set one there. Okay, so I'll save that. Control S, and I'll hit the debug icon. So I'm going for the best, oh no, wait, what happened there? I was hoping, I didn't see too much information on this on YouTube, so I was hoping to get a really good definition. What happened here? line 10. Error expected expression before period token. What line is that? 46. Okay, so that should be a comma here. So we'll try that again. And there's still another one. Oh no, that's it. Okay. So we're starting out in the main function here. So we have max pointing to 0. I'm going to step in. So while len points to get line is greater than 0, so we'll step in. Okay, so while len points to get line, so it's going to call, so what's happening here is it's saying while len points to get line. So first it's going to check get line, the function, because there's two parentheses here, indicating that it's going to go to the function call. So once it hits this line, it's going to automatically go to the function get line, and then it's going to check if get line returns something greater than 0, I believe. So we'll just we'll go to that function here. So get line. So are we supposed to would it be best to input letters or numbers? Okay, so because I think we're going to have to input something here. So we have for I equals 0, I is less than max line minus 1. Okay, so this is going to, sorry, I'm just going to change this to like 5, maybe 3. Okay, we'll do 5. Just do, actually we'll do 5 times. So that's going to be how many iterations it looks like. 1000 is going to be too much. So I'll just save it and re-debug it. Unless you guys want to sit here and iterate 1000 times, like that would be okay, I guess. Okay, so we have max points to 1000. Sorry, max points to 0. So while len points to get line, so it's going to jump to the get line function again. For I points to 0, I is less than max line, so max line is now 5 minus 1. So max line is 5, so we go, it's saying I is less than max line minus 1, so I is less than 4. Excuse me, so we have and C points to get char does not equal EOF and C does not equal new line. So okay, so I is currently 0. We haven't stepped in yet, so that's garbage. That's a garbage value. So for I is equal to 0, I is less than max line minus 1, which is true. So that's it's currently 4. And C points to get char, so we're gonna get something from standard input, and it's gonna check that it's not EOF. To signal EOF, I think it's Control Z, and then and C does not equal to new line. We went over EOF in previous videos, so just check those out if you haven't seen those in the playlist. It would be somewhere near the beginning. I recommend just watching the whole playlist if you're learning the language. So here, and it's also going to check that it's not a new line, or there's no new line in the string at least, or yeah, string, or it's a char, so yeah, string or character. So we're gonna have we're gonna step in. It's gonna probably take input. Okay, so it's gonna take input. I'm gonna input. I'll just do the letter. Actually no, I'll do an. Okay, I'll do a letter. I'll do A, lowercase a, and I'll hit enter. So line of array index. Line of array index I, which is 0. So the line. So remember we have an external. We have char line, which is global, and we've now set it to extern. So we're pretty much just accessing it globally. That's all that's really happening. So this code is kind of redundant, as they mentioned, so I don't know why they'd give us a redundant example. But that's the authors of the language, so there you go. So we'll have line of array index I points to C. Is that where we are? Okay, so in the line array, index 0 is going to point to the letter A, which we can't see because it's global, so that's silly as well. So in the C language, you can't see global variables. In other languages, you can. I guess in this case, we can't see global variables or external variables, or the same. So now it's not telling us how much max line is either. Okay, so max line minus 1 is going to be 4, so I guess, okay, so yeah, so max line doesn't change. So for I is equal to 0, I is less than max line minus 1. So max line was 5 minus 1 is 4, so this time I should be equal to, after we step in, I should be equal to 1 because we incremented once. Because right now, okay, so we incremented once and now we've came back up. So when we step back through the loop, it's going to increment the second time. So I is now I is now I is now 1. I should have taken input there, shouldn't have. Okay, so there was a I believe there was a new line at the end of that string. So where are we now? So C points to 10. Okay. So C points to 10. Let me just pull up the ASCII table for you guys here on my other device. Okay, so what's the value of 10? So I'll just go ASC. I'll just Google ASCII table. So you can check this out by going to asciitable.com. So looking for the decimal 10. Yeah, so I believe at the end of a string, because C, what was C? In C, okay, so C points to get char, so at the end of a string, there's going to be or a character array, there's going to be a new line at the there's going to be an invisible new line at the end of the string. So once we iterated A and we went to the next part, we iterated from 0 to 1 in the loop. It then was holding or storing the value new line as the value 10. And the reason why it's 10, because if you look at the ASCII table, as I just mentioned, by going to asciitable.com, then if you go to the decimal column and go to 10, go right, and you'll see line feed. So line feed means, that's what it means. So it means new line. It means the symbol new line, like that. So that has the value 10. So it was a line feed. So therefore this loop got, it exited because the condition was false, because it says does not equal EOF and C does not equal line feed. So C did equal to the line feed, so it skipped. So if C points to new line, which it does, line of array index I, points to C, then we increment I by 1. Then we're saying, okay, well now we're setting that line of array index 2. So after we just incremented I, so we have an A, then we have an A, and then we have a new line, and then we incremented I by 1. So in the array we have an A. Then beside it, it would be nice to show that, but it doesn't show it because it's global or external. So in array index 0 we have an A, in array index 1 we have a new line. Then we incremented I by 1, so in array index 0, 1. So in array index 2, we now have a null sitting at the end. So we have an A, a new line, and a null. Then we're going to return I. So I was, here I was 2, right? So we returned I, sorry, we returned 2 for get line, because it returns an int, return type here. It has an int there, return type. So we returned 2 for this function. This line was executed, len points to get line is greater than 0, so now it's showing len points to 2 because len points to get line, which is 2, and that's greater than 0. That's why it's in the parentheses, so it's a little confusing. Hopefully you guys understand from the way I'm explaining it. So once again, len, the variable, points to get line, which returned the value 2, right? Now that whole thing is greater than 0, thus this condition is true. So it enters the loop if len is greater than max, which is true because max is 0. Max points to len, so max points to 2, and then call the copy function. So it's going to skip to the copy function now, because it's saying call the copy function. So we're going to skip down to where the copy function is defined. We have a local I, and then we're calling extern line and longest to access them again. So what it's really doing is saying, okay, well we want to share the global line array and longest array with all functions in this whole source file. So it's saying, okay, well instead of having a local line array and a local longest, we want it to be external. We're getting it from somewhere else other than this function. So it's saying, okay, we'll look past this function scope for a definition of line and longest. So it's going to get them from up here, which it's just going to show that it's global. That's all it's really doing. So it's pretty much redundant, or it's another way to use external to show that it's a global variable, I guess, to specify it as explicitly. Or you can, the best way to use it is between source files, so we may do another example later on. So hopefully you guys understand at least up until now. So we have I points to 0. So this is a local I, it's not external, it's not global. So while longest of array index I points to line of array index I does not equal null plus plus I, so we should get the value of 2 or something because we have A. It doesn't show it, which is stupid in this language, right? It doesn't show us what's in the array. But remember, we have an A, an index 0, a new line, and then a null. So in the line array, we have line of array index 0 pointing to the character A. Then we have line of array index 1 pointing to the new line. Then we have line of array index 2 pointing to the null, I believe. That should be shown to us, but since it's a C language, it doesn't show us global or external variables, or both. So here we're here. So I'll step in. So 1, 2. There we go. So it is 2 because we had A for 0, 1. A for 0, 1 was new line, and 2 was so we incremented twice, so 0 to 1 and then 1 to 2. So on the first iteration, line of array index 0. Oh, I hate when it does that. So in the first iteration, line of array index 0 was A, the character A. Then we went down here, and I went from 0 to 1. Then we came back up here. I is now 1. While longest of array index I, which is 1, points to line of array index I, does not equal null. It doesn't because it was new line. So it's going to step in, increment I by 1, so now I is 2. We're up here, while longest array of array index I, which is 2, array index 2, points to line of array index 2 does not equal null. Well, it does because line of array index 2 equals null. Now it was skipped, so now we're here. Over here, well then. So we're here, so while len points to get line is greater than 0, so it's going to call this function again. So now it's going to do the exact same thing until we signal EOF. Does this just continue like this? Okay, so I signal EOF with control plus Z, or just control and hitting the command control Z. I don't know if that's just for C line, but it should be something similar to that for the C language. So I signal EOF with control Z. So I think it was just a null. Return I. So max was 0, I guess, in this case. Okay, yeah, so that was skip. So we returned 0. That was it. So there you go. So that was the code. That was the example. Hopefully you guys understand. Didn't confuse anyone. So it was pretty good practice either way. There's a lot of good concepts. Lots of advanced concepts, like at least even in programming concepts, like these kind of conditions, which are more advanced loops, which are good. So yeah, so hopefully you guys understand. If you guys like the video, you guys can like and subscribe to the channel if you want for more coding and videos. Also investing videos if you guys are interested in that, trading videos, making trading bots, anything. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care.